There is a particular kind of loyalty that most people understand without needing it explained to them. You can disagree with your family. You can find them difficult, exhausting, imperfect in every way that families reliably are. But there is an unspoken boundary, one that most people instinctively respect, around the right of an outsider to mock the people who raised you, to reduce them to a punchline, to say, in front of others, the thing that communicates most clearly your people are beneath consideration. When that outsider is the person you married, the violation carries a particular weight. And when it happens on a game show stage, in front of 200 strangers and a national television camera, the question becomes very simple: what does a woman of genuine dignity do with that moment? Does she absorb it the way she has absorbed it before? Or does she, finally, decide that this is the room and this is the moment and she is done absorbing? Before we go any further, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because what Naomi Castillo did on that stage in the summer of 2023 is exactly the reason we tell these stories. Not because it was dramatic, not because it ended in chaos, but because it was measured and clear and absolutely final, and because Steve Harvey, a man who has seen everything, stood up and applauded her for it. Minutes. Naomi Castillo was 47 years old, and the family she had grown up in was the most important thing in her life. A fact she had never hidden from anyone, least of all the man she had married. She had been raised in San Antonio, Texas, the second of 4 children in a Mexican-American household where her parents, Rodrigo and Elena Vega, had built something remarkable from very little. Rodrigo had come to the United States from Monterrey at the age of 19 with a student visa, a trade qualification in electrical work, and the kind of focused determination that does not require external validation. Elena had followed 2 years later, and together they had built a small electrical contracting business that, by the time Naomi was in high school, employed 11 people and had a reputation in the San Antonio construction community for doing exactly what it said it would do, on time and without complaint. The Vega household operated on a set of values that Naomi had absorbed so completely that she could not always separate them from her own personality. Work without self-pity, treat everyone with the respect you want to receive, never let family go undefended, and understand that the people who built something from nothing deserve to have that something honored rather than dismissed. These were not posted on a wall. They were simply present in the way Rodrigo and Elena moved through the world, and Naomi had learned them by proximity across 2 decades of daily observation. She had studied business administration at the University of Texas at San Antonio and had returned after graduation to join the family company, eventually becoming its operations manager, the person who kept the practical machinery of the business running while Rodrigo concentrated on client relationships and Elena managed the finances. She was, by every account of those who worked with her, the precise and dependable center of an organization that her parents had built and that she intended to see endure. She had met her husband, Craig Castillo, at an industry conference in Austin in 2004 when she was 28 and he was 32. Craig was a commercial property developer, well-educated, professionally ambitious, and possessed of the specific confidence of a man who has never had reason to doubt that his instincts are sound. He was charming in a way that Naomi had found, in the early years, compelling. He was also, she would come to understand gradually over the course of their 18-year marriage, a man who carried a quiet but persistent condescension toward things he considered beneath his professional and social register. And the Vega family, with their trade background and their working-class origins and their Spanish spoken comfortably at the dinner table, sat in Craig's private taxonomy, somewhere below that register. He had never been openly hostile. That was the complexity of it. He had been, instead, consistently deflating. The comment at a family gathering about the food being a lot, delivered with the smile of a man who believed he was being witty. The remark, made to a colleague at a dinner party Naomi had not been told she would be attending, about her family being very traditional, if you know what I mean. The joke, repeated more than once, about the Vega family electrical business being a step up from extension cords, each comment small enough to be denied. The cumulative effect across 18 years, unmistakable, Naomi had addressed it directly 3 times in their marriage. The first time, Craig had apologized and explained that she was being oversensitive. The second time, he had apologized and explained that it was just his sense of humor. The third time, he had not apologized at all, and Naomi had made a decision not to leave, not to confront him again in private, but to wait for the moment when the right audience was present, not for revenge, for clarity. She believed, with the practical conviction of a woman who had learned from her parents that some things need to be built correctly the first time or not at all, that certain statements needed to be made in front of witnesses to be properly received. The Family Feud appearance had been arranged by her brother, Marco, who was 38 and worked alongside Naomi in the family business, and who had, with the uncomplicated optimism of a man who still believed a good day could fix most things, submitted the family application as a birthday surprise for their mother Elena. Elena had turned 70 the previous spring and had watched Family Feud every weeknight for 15 years without missing an episode. When the casting team called back, she had cried for 10 minutes and then immediately begun worrying about what to wear. Craig had agreed to participate with the enthusiasm of a man who expected to be good at things and was generally correct in that expectation. He had prepared, in his fashion, by watching several episodes and identifying what he considered inefficiencies in the way contestants selected their family members for different rounds. He had presented his analysis to Naomi the evening before the taping. She had listened and said that they would see how it went. She had already decided, some time before that evening, that the day would go however it needed to go. ACT 3, Tichi Stirugl Isa 4:12 minutes. The Castillo family arrived at the Family Feud studio in Los Angeles alongside the Bennett family from Memphis, a warm, large, immediately likable group of cousins who had arrived early, taken the best seats in the green room, and were already loudly debating strategy when the Castillos walked in. The contrast between the two families was visible from the first moment. The Bennetts were united in their noise, the Castillos were united in their warmth, with the particular ease of a family that has spent decades being comfortable in each other's company. Elena Vega, who was the reason the day existed at all, was wearing a deep green blazer she had purchased the previous month and pressed that morning with the seriousness of someone preparing for an occasion that deserved to be met correctly. She was 70 years old, and she moved with the unhurried assurance of a woman who has spent 5 decades knowing exactly who she is and has long since stopped needing anyone else's confirmation of it. The studio crew, who saw hundreds of families pass through their doors, noticed her immediately. One of the camera operators told a colleague during setup that the woman in the green blazer had a quality he could not name, but that the camera was going to love. The first 3 rounds were excellent for the Castillos. Marco was fast and instinctive on the buzzer. Naomi was precise. Elena, who played the second round with the unhurried confidence of someone who has spent 15 years internalizing the most common survey answers, landed the #1 response to the opening question of her round, and received a standing ovation from a studio audience that had adopted her completely within the first 5 minutes of her arrival. Craig played well. He was competitive and accurate, his preparation evident in the methodical way he approached each question. He received his share of the audience's appreciation and accepted it with the ease of a man accustomed to performing well in rooms. Between the 3rd and 4th rounds, Steve Harvey brought the full family together for the conversational interlude. He moved through the Castillos with his characteristic warmth, drawing out the details that gave the audience a sense of who they were watching. Elena's story, the business, the 49 years with Rodrigo, the 15 years of nightly Family Feud viewership, produced a response from the audience that was immediate and genuine. Steve asked her what she was going to do with the prize money if they won. She said she was going to buy Rodrigo a new fishing rod and put the rest in the business account, and the audience laughed with the particular affection of people who recognize a completely authentic human being when they are presented with one. Then Steve turned to Craig. He asked the question he asked all sons-in-law, with his characteristic blend of warmth and mild mischief: what was it like to be part of this family? Craig smiled. the smile of a man about to demonstrate what he considered charm. "It's quite an experience," he said. "You know, very family-oriented. Very close. Very." He paused for the effect he was going for. "A lot." He laughed. It was the laugh of a man who expects to be joined. The audience did not join him. The silence was the specific kind that falls when a joke has been understood and found to be at the expense of the wrong person. Steve Harvey's expression did not change in any dramatic way, but those who watched the footage carefully later would note that something in his eyes shifted at precisely the moment Craig laughed, a movement of assessment that suggested he had placed Craig's comment accurately and was deciding what to do with the placement. Elena, standing at the far end of the family group, had heard the comment. Her expression did not change. She was a woman who had absorbed dismissal across a lifetime of building something in a world that did not always take people who looked and spoke like her seriously, and she had developed, through that lifetime, a composure in the face of it that was entirely unperformative. She simply looked at Craig for a moment with the clear, unhurried gaze of someone registering a fact, and then looked away. It was Naomi who moved. Not dramatically, not with a raised voice or a visible display of anger. She took one step forward, a single, deliberate step that placed her slightly in front of Craig and slightly closer to her mother. And she said, in a voice that was completely level and absolutely certain, "I would like to say something about my family, if that is all right." Steve Harvey looked at her. "Please," he said. And he meant it. ACT4C, THE2RNEROUND 12-16 minutes. Naomi Castillo spoke for 4 minutes. She did not raise her voice once. She did not look at Craig. She spoke to Steve Harvey and through him, to the room. And what she said had the quality of something that had been prepared not that morning or the night before, but over 18 years of patient, accumulating clarity. She told them about Rodrigo arriving in the United States at 19 with a trade qualification and a determination that had never required anyone's approval. She told them about Elena following 2 years later, about the business built over 30 years from a single van and a telephone number to an 11-person operation with a reputation that preceded it. She told them about the dinner table where she and her siblings had grown up, about the way her parents had treated every person who sat at it, whether a family member or a stranger, with the same complete and genuine attention. She told them about the fishing rod that Elena was going to buy Rodrigo with the prize money, and about the fact that after 49 years, her mother's first instinct was still to give something to the man she loved. "These people," she said, "are not a lot. They are not an experience. They are not a joke, and they have never been a joke. They came here with nothing, and they built something that I am proud to have my name attached to. And I have been patient with the idea that someone who married into this family might need time to understand what it is. But there is no more time. This is my family, and they deserve to be spoken about with respect." She said the last sentence without heat, without drama, in the tone of a person issuing a final statement of fact rather than a complaint or a plea. The studio was completely silent. Then Steve Harvey did something he had not done in that way, in that specific context in the show's history. He began to applaud, slowly, deliberately, standing where he was. Not the performative applause of a host cueing an audience response, but the genuine, considered applause of a man who has heard something he believes deserves acknowledgement and is providing it. The audience followed immediately, and the sound that filled the studio was not the reflexive enthusiasm of a prompted crowd but the warm, sustained recognition of 200 people who had understood what they had just witnessed and were choosing, individually and collectively, to mark it. Elena Vega, standing at the edge of the family group, pressed one hand to her heart. It was the only outward sign she gave of what she was feeling, and it was sufficient. Steve walked toward Naomi. He stopped in front of her and looked at her for a moment before speaking. "I have asked that question to a lot of sons-in-law," he said, "and I have heard a lot of answers, but I have never had a wife respond to her husband's answer the way you just responded, and I want you to know something." He paused. "What you just did was not just for your mother. It was for every person in this room who has ever sat quietly while someone they loved was reduced to a punchline. You did not let it pass. You stood up and said this is who these people are. That is one of the bravest things I have seen on this stage." He turned to Craig. The shift in his expression was slight but complete. Not hostile, not theatrical, but carrying the specific gravity of a man who has something important to deliver and will deliver it plainly. "Brother," he said, "the woman you married just told you, in front of everyone here, who her family is. She did not do it to embarrass you. She did it because she needed you to hear it properly, in a room where it could not be dismissed." He paused. "The question now is whether you are going to hear it." Craig said nothing immediately. He had the expression of a man who has arrived at a moment he cannot manage his way past with confidence or charm, and who is, for the first time in a long time, uncertain what to do next. It was not, those who watched the footage said later, an ugly expression. It was the expression of a person being genuinely confronted with something they had not previously allowed to be fully real to them. After a moment, he turned to Alina. Not to Naomi, to Alina, and he said, with a directness and simplicity that was the most unguarded thing he had produced all afternoon, "I owe you an apology. I have owed you one for a long time. I am sorry." Alina looked at him. She nodded once, with the unhurried dignity of a woman who has waited a long time for something and will receive it with the same composure she has maintained throughout the waiting. "Thank you," she said. It was not a reconciliation. It was a beginning, and everyone in the room understood the difference. Marco, who had arranged the entire day out of love for his mother, put his arm around Elena. Naomi took her mother's hand. Steve Harvey stepped back and let the moment be what it was, complete, unrushed, and entirely theirs. ACT 50 Legacy EC 16/20 minutes. The Castillo episode aired 6 weeks after the taping. Within 36 hours, the clip of Naomi's 4-minute address had been shared 11 million times. It was translated into 9 languages within the first week. It was covered by entertainment publications, family advocacy organizations, immigration community networks, and, notably, by several business media outlets who focused not on the marital dynamic, but on Naomi's description of the Vega family business and the specific, articulate pride with which she had delivered it. The response was extensive and, in its breadth, revealing. It came from women who had spent years absorbing the quiet condescension of a partner who considered their family of origin to be something to be managed or minimized. It came from immigrant families and the children of immigrant families who recognized in Alina and Rodrigo's story the story of their own parents. The trade skills, the determination, the business built slowly from a van and a telephone number. It came from people who had never experienced any of that specifically but who recognized, in Naomi's 4 minutes, the universal shape of someone standing up for a thing that matters and refusing to do it halfway. "My parents came to this country from the Philippines with nothing," one woman wrote. "My husband has made the same kind of comment that Craig made, in the same kind of tone, at the same kind of family gathering, more times than I can count. I have always let it pass." I watched Naomi take one step forward and speak for 4 minutes without raising her voice, and I realized that letting it pass is not the same as accepting it. I had a conversation with my husband that night that was 20 years overdue. Naomi gave a single interview, 3 months after the episode aired, conducted for a publication focused on family business and entrepreneurship. She was precise and composed throughout, the same qualities that had been present on the stage. And she spoke about the experience with a clarity that suggested she had processed it thoroughly rather than performing reflection for an audience. She said that the decision to step forward and speak had not been made that morning. She said it had been made gradually, over the course of many years, and that the stage had simply provided the correct conditions. An audience large enough that what was said could not be reclassified as a private misunderstanding afterward. She said she had not been angry when she spoke. She had been resolved. She drew the distinction carefully, explaining that anger produces heat but rarely produces clarity, whereas resolution produces clarity without requiring heat. She said her mother had demonstrated that distinction consistently for 50 years, and that she had simply, on this occasion, followed her example. She said something that circulated widely after the interview's publication. My father came here at 19 and built something that employs 11 families. My mother stood beside him for 49 years and built it alongside him. The idea that this is a background to be embarrassed by, that it is something to be spoken about in that tone, in that way, is not something I am willing to accommodate any further. I should have said so sooner. I said it when I was ready. I said it correctly. Elena Vega gave no formal interview. She appeared briefly in a follow-up segment filmed at the Vega family home 4 months after the original airing. She sat at the kitchen table where she had hosted family dinners for 30 years, with Rodrigo beside her, and she answered Steve Harvey's follow-up question. What did it mean to hear your daughter say those things about your family? In 2 sentences. It meant she learned what we tried to teach, she said. It means we did not waste our time. Rodrigo, who had not spoken on camera until that point, put his hand over Elena's on the table and nodded once. The follow-up segment was 45 seconds long. It was the most shared clip from the episode's second round of circulation. Craig Castillo participated in a couples counseling process that Naomi had made a condition of continuing the marriage. He gave no public statement. Those close to the family reported, in the months following the episode, that the process was ongoing and that Craig had engaged with it with more genuine effort than Naomi had initially expected. She said, in the closing paragraphs of her interview, that she did not know how it would resolve. She said she did not need to know yet. What she needed, and what the afternoon had provided, was the certainty that she had finally said the thing that needed to be said in the right room, without apology or softening, and that her family had heard it. Steve Harvey addressed the episode in several subsequent interviews, consistently citing it as one of the moments from the show's recent history that had affected him most personally. He said that what distinguished Naomi's response from other strong moments he had witnessed on that stage was its precision, the complete absence of excess, the way every word had done exactly the work it needed to do and no more. He said that he had begun to applaud not as a hosting instinct, but as a genuine, involuntary response to something that had moved him before he had fully processed why. What Naomi said was not a speech, he observed. A speech is designed to impress. What she said was a statement. The kind of statement that a person makes when they have been clear about something for a very long time and are finally delivering the clarity to the person who needed to receive it. There is a difference between those two things, and the room felt the difference immediately. That is why people responded the way they did. Not because it was dramatic, because it was true, and because truth delivered with that kind of precision is one of the rarest things you will ever see. The broader cultural response to the episode settled into a conversation that was simultaneously about marriage and about something larger, about the specific experience of families whose origins are viewed, by those who marry into them, as a social liability to be managed rather than a history to be respected. Immigration advocacy organizations shared the clip in the context of broader discussions about how immigrant working class families are perceived and treated within mixed background marriages. Family business networks circulated it in discussions about generational pride and the importance of children who understand the value of what their parents built. Naomi Castillo had come to Family Feud because her brother had surprised their mother with a gift. She had come ready, having made a decision years earlier that was simply waiting for its moment. When the moment arrived, she took one step forward and spoke for 4 minutes in the measured, undecorated tone of a woman who knows exactly what she is saying and does not need volume or drama to ensure it is heard. Her family had built something from nothing. She had said so, in public, in front of everyone, and Steve Harvey, a man who had applauded thousands of moments in his career, had stood on that stage and started the applause himself because he understood, before the audience had quite caught up, that what he had just witnessed was one of those rare things, a person being exactly who they were, at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right words. Some things only need to be said once. Said correctly, in the right room, they last forever. If Naomi's story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone whose family deserves to be defended rather than diminished, share this with them today. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do so now. These are the stories that remind us what it looks like to stand up for what matters. We will keep telling them for as long as you are here.